Welcome back to the Beyond the Batter's Box podcast. I'm your host, Nick Kemper. I have Terry Phillips here with me again today. Today we have University of Washington strength and conditioning coach Joe Murray on. Joe, thanks for coming on.
Absolutely, guys. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Go ahead and tell us about your path, kind of like what brought you into strength and conditioning and what brought you to UW, because you were with the Mariners, right, before
Correct,
that?
Yeah.
Perfect. So go ahead and share like your story, kind of what brought you here.
Sure. Yeah. No, I've been here twice now, if that makes sense, and I'll get into that a little bit. But I played baseball down at LMU in LA, so that's kind of where I got my first taste of strength conditioning. Not first taste of strength conditioning, but in the college setting, for sure. Was not a great baseball player, so I tried to be really good in the weight room, and that's kind of what I fell in love with and got better at as my time went on in college, and kind of pursued it as a career after. I was kind of figuring my life out and seeing what the next step might be, and I had some great coaches down there, one of which I actually saw this weekend at that conference I was at. So got to catch up with him and talk about, life and all that kind of stuff, which is cool to see how that happens. But ended up coming up here when my hitting coach at LMU took the hitting coach job here. So he reached out to me, said, hey, it's not strength and conditioning, but it's a foot in the door at a university, in the college setting. You want to do S&C and do this, but like you can be a student manager here with the baseball team. You can throw BP setup, all that kind of stuff, and hopefully get the ball rolling and connect and do all that kind of stuff. So that was my first taste of the University of Washington with Coach Meggs, and then ended up leaving after that 1 year to go intern at TCU with Coach Dakin down there and all the other sports that were down there that you get to work with when you're interning, football, basketball, and obviously learned a ton working with baseball and Coach Dakin down there. So awesome opportunity there. And then, like you said, got my first full-time job off of that. Ended up working with the Mariners. I think I was assigned to our Holloway affiliate, West Virginia Power, for the year. Made it out to spring training. Having a great time, getting my feet wet, being around all these pro guys for the first time. And then the whole COVID thing happened. So we had, a meeting, org meeting in, the cafeteria, like, hey, we're going to send everyone home. Got some minor leaguers coming in today. We're actually just going to send them right back home on a flight tomorrow. So hold tight. We'll see what happens. Everything will blow over in a couple weeks, right? That's what everyone kind of thought. Did not happen that way. So I ended up going home. Kind of just working from home as well as everyone could at that point in time, checking in with the guys who were assigned to my roster and just trying to help them and facilitate lifts and all that kind of stuff because no one really knew what was happening, especially on the minor league side of things when that was going to start up. So a lot of checking in, a lot of Zoom mobility sessions, a lot of just, like these guys sending you videos that you sprint in, like, hey, what can I work on here, that kind of stuff. So everyone was trying to make the most out of the situation at the time. And then as that year came to an end, on the big league side of things, I had an opportunity. Coach Meggs from UW reached out to me. The strength staff reached out to me, and they had an opening with the baseball team. And other sports, men's, women's tennis, and men's golf. Reached out to me, and I really liked my time up here the first time. I knew I had some rapport with the coaching staff to come back in and jump right in. And I knew that was kind of where I wanted to be. So been up here ever since. 5 years now, which is crazy to think about, but been here 5 years. Have moved into a more director of sports science role, which is kind of being built on the fly. We're kind of saying we're building the plane as it flies, so we're figuring out what that entails. And how we can better optimize a lot of our systems with all the data and tech that we're using, how we can better implement that into not only baseball but across our entire department on the Olympic side of things and just streamline a lot of those systems. And one day we'll get there. So we're working on it. But yeah.
I had a college coach who always would tell us basically like land the plane.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't matter like what it looks like as long as you land the plane.
No doubt.
So yeah, that's kind of like you mentioned you're building the plane on the fly. So
Yeah.
land it. You had a short stint in pro ball.
Yes.
Would you ever go back? Was it something that you kind of was like, wow, that really wasn't what I thought it was going to be? Obviously, you had a different experience with COVID.
Yeah.
But was it something that you think like, okay, I could go back, or like, are you more set on college?
I think it's the way college sports are going right now. It's becoming a much more professional environment for sure, which I think we'll probably talk about later in some ways. But I had a great time in my brief stint. I wish I had that full year with the M's to get the full ride the bus experience and all that kind of stuff, and navigating the highs and lows of a minor league season. So I would never say no to going back into pro ball at all. But think I'm really enjoying the role that I'm in right now, and kind of the creativity it allows us to kind of build something at UW right now, which is, I think, exciting. And we've got a lot of support internally to get that job done, which is really encouraging. So I think that just, you never know, but I'm enjoying where I'm at right now.
For sure. You mentioned the changing landscape of college athletics, and you also mentioned the support that UW gets. Were you ever in a position, basically like smaller schools, they deal with a lot less financial resources than a Power 4 like UW? What is that kind of like? What advantage do you have? Obviously, you guys have a ton more technology and a ton more resources at UW. Talk about more like what is the difference like from a like smaller school with little resources to a school like UW that has a lot more resources and that changing landscape?
Yeah, I think just from the change in investment into tech across the board. I mean, we saw Wake Forest building out their pitching lab, getting a trajectory, all that kind of stuff. Like, those guys are invested in building out the development side of things. I think that's the approach that a lot of schools in general are taking to how can we win on, margins. And if we're not going to be, if you're not going to be an SEC school with the kind of backing, how can we kind of figure out a way to still have a leg up on teams that might have more money, might have more resources to them. And it comes down to, I think, doing whatever you can do well. We can track everything that we want. We can do all this, but if it's not implemented and executed in a way that's actually moving the needle for us on the field or in practice, and then what are we really doing? We're kind of spinning our wheels. So I think that's the hard part. I think there's probably a lot of schools out there that have all the resources, have all the tech, and then it's probably pretty poorly executed and implemented into actual things like practice planning and workload management. The always fun buzz topic of workload management and how we go about that. But I think that's, in terms of resources, I think that's what we're in a good spot at UW to continue to build on, is just having people in place to staff and execute those systems that you want to build out. And how can we continue to build that out? Because we can have all the tech in the world, but if we don't have the people to run a force plate test in the middle of a lift, then what are we really collecting, and how standardized are we getting with our execution of a plan? So I think that's what we're figuring out kind of as we fly this plane and try to figure it out. And how, I think, whether you're well-resourced or not, how you can kind of get the most out of it is how you implement, execute, and roll it out to coaching staffs, not just on the strength side, but on everyone's side.
What would you say, and this isn't to be obviously exclusive to UW, based off like conversations you have with other strength coaches, what would you say is like kind of like the lowest hanging fruit of stuff that is missed on the execution of implementation of the data from the force plates and other tech that you might be using?
I think in general it comes down to education. I think in terms, on the strength conditioning and the rehab side of things and sports science side of things, we know a lot about all these pieces of tech that we're implementing, and I'll actually bring it back to a conversation that I had with my strength coach at LMU in a second. But how do we make this information that we're collecting actionable for sport coaches? The story that I have from my strength coach at LMU, Jack McCormick, shout out. He gave me a rundown because we were at this fall conference this last weekend. I mentioned to you guys earlier, very force plate heavy. And we were just talking about how at LMU, we jump matted. That was kind of our KPI for lower body explosive power. And how he ran this analysis with, like all of the information that we had. Relative strength is important, and jump height's going up, like trying to convey all this information to our head coach at the time. And he had this great presentation rolled out, and then, at the end of it, he kind of asked, like, okay, does that make sense? Like, is this, do we understand, like, kind of what we're trying to get at here? And I guess our head coach at the time was like, it probably does to you, but not me. But I trust you on it, that kind of is like, I'm sure it's great. Like, I believe you. I don't know how to, interpret it. So I think that's how I think that's probably missed a lot. And how something that can be executed better in terms of and implemented better is how are we making this information. We've got 1 million metrics on a force plate, and all this GPS data that exists for field sports that use GPS. How do we make that into simple, actionable processes and decisions to actually not the sport coach doesn't need to be overwhelmed with the data. That's kind of our intermediary job. But how do we simplify what we need to collect and make it actionable on field or, in practice or skill development, whatever that is. However, whatever the depth of your, sports science implementation might be, how can we make it actually useful and move the needle? Like, we can improve the force place numbers all we want, improve, top end speed, but if it's not transferring onto the field, then what's the point, So I think that's probably the lowest hanging fruit, how we communicate and get that point across, So
I'm glad you bring up, I don't want to say the battle, but it kind of is the battle of like dealing with like actual sport coaches and head coaches, because a lot of people don't realize this. And we had Devin Morgan on a couple weeks ago, basically talking about, he shared a story. One of his son's friends like came home one day and said something like, oh, like my coach didn't let me do this, or like my coach basically sucked at doing this. And like his son's reaction was like, a coach can make you bad. and like the short answer is yes, but then also like talking about or touching on how difficult it is for some strength and conditioning coaches to basically collaborate with the head coach and get him or her on the same page as you guys in terms of what you guys want to implement. I know that, I had several battles when I was like growing up with like coaches, both in high school and in college. I know a ton of schools also battle with that same thing, especially smaller schools. I feel like it's always smaller schools that battle with it, which is ironic because those are the ones that probably need it the most. But in terms of the implementation of the force plate, how do you get players to buy into? Because like coaches are half the battle, or probably more than half the battle, but then players too. Like you have to have players actually buy into what you're doing, otherwise it's probably not going to work either.
Yeah, definitely. I think in terms of just for the force plate example specifically, I think kind of explaining them the why. I think a lot of it depends on the athlete, but some athletes respond really well, just being like, hey, this is our leaderboard. Who's going to jump the highest? Some people don't have that intrinsic motivation or extrinsic motivation of seeing their name at the top of the list. And if I found it, especially with guys and girls who are already like high performers on the court, who don't really see the value in the strength and conditioning side of things, or at least pushing the envelope in there when they're already so good. And so trying to frame it in a way, having the general motivation behind it, leaderboard type of implementation, where we can be like, hey, we're chasing this number today. How can we try to beat it? How can you compete against yourself every day and try to get better? I think the thing that a lot of people, that at least the value that I've had from being in one place for 5 years now, which is I think a long time in the strength and conditioning world, is being able to accumulate a pretty good data set of, for us, mostly pretty much the main test that I'll do with all of my teams across the board is just a counter movement jump. And so being able to I have a senior tennis player this year who came in, could barely do a push-up, battling for her life in the weight room. You're just trying to find entry points to move the needle for her. And now we have this 4-year data set of her and how she's steadily improved in all these metrics on the force plate. And I think that's one of the big values of any type of data collection, force plate or otherwise, to show the progress that you're making. I think that's where I get a ton of value from it. I've got pro ball guys that are back in the off season that come, and we look at their force plate data from when they were freshmen. My guy Will Simpson, looking at what he was doing his sophomore or junior year when I first got there, and comparing it to now, it's like you're a completely different person. And like to have that context and see that progression, I think creates a lot of buy-in to not only, yes, the collection, because we don't want to burn people out on data collection in terms of making it aerobic, especially in season or when you're doing it frequently. I think that can definitely happen. But you're giving people buy-in to the program and the development that you're trying to implement with them, and how you're trying to train them and push them and get them to adapt to whatever level you're trying to get them. If whether it's just jumping from 9 inches on a force plate to 11, if in the case of a tennis girl that I had, or if you're someone who over the span of 5 or so years we've seen go from like we were laughing about it this offseason, like looking back at some of Will's numbers, he was jumping like 14.2 inches on a force plate. Now he's at like 23 and a half. It's like seeing that longitudinal progress is huge. I think that's the big motivator for me, but it also comes down to not overwhelming them with information. Like I'm giving them data bits that they can digest. It's the same battles with the strength coaches. Like if I'm telling you to jump higher, like that's what I want you to chase. I don't want you to overthink the strategy. I'm not going to over explain to you well, our eccentric duration was up, so I think we should really work on how we're loading. I just want you to jump fast and jump high. Jump as high as you can, as fast as you can, and let's see what the numbers say today, and we can adjust from there. Not adjust, but just continue building on there. I try not to overvalue each, because we do it in more of not necessarily a modern monitoring model in terms of like making adjustments on the fly based on the force plate data we have, but we're evaluating trends over training cycles and all that kind of stuff to see if we're moving in the right direction or what other components we might need to address. Obviously, the force plate is only one element of that, but I think it comes down to creating tangible things for that athlete to chase to try to improve and make sure that output is high. We get a lot of the same value out of any kind of velocity based training. It's not necessarily the specific adaptations of strength speed versus speed strength that we're chasing, but we're using it as a tool to drive intent in the session, move things fast, give them a range to sit in, and try to either move as much weight as they can at that range or move things fast. And I think that's where a lot of the buy-in terms of just force plate or any kind of tech, if we can make it tangible and not overwhelming for the athlete and the sport coach, then I think that's where you can really move the needle in how it's implemented.
Have you dealt with pushback? And if you have, like, what do you do to kind of combat that? Do you lean more on players? Do you kind of have a sit down with the player who is pushing back? How do you deal with that?
I think I think up here we're lucky where a lot of the athletes that we have that come in are very motivated. At the university, while you don't really get here without being willing to put in a lot of work or being able to push the envelope or want to be great. So I think that's what we're lucky to have with the type of athlete that we recruit across the board. I think our sport coaches do a great job of that. But how can we continue to motivate people within that if they're not really bought in? It's creating, I think, tangible information for them, and I think it's explaining yourself well, like explaining why it's important, how you can kind of bridge the gap to them. Okay, we do have this highly skilled tennis player who's not necessarily bought into the weight room. How can we show them that by improving something like their jump height, their serve might go up, or whatever, their explosive ability might go up? How can we frame the information in a way that is transferable to the on-field stuff or on-court stuff that we're trying to do? And seeing how it's just really any kind of training is just supposed to amplify and contextually build up the sport specific skill. So if we're framing it in that lens, I've found a lot of success with working with athletes who may be a little apprehensive to whether it's someone who's had a bad history of training in the weight room or has had their information used against them in the past. You get that a lot, I think, especially in in a lot of skill oriented sports sometimes. But coming at it from the lens of like, this is here to help. Like, this is all this information we're using to help frame the best plan for you and kind of use it as an individualized training framework, then we can build on that for sure.
You've talked about long-term development pretty extensively here. What kind of battles do you face with the transfer portal and NIL now with current like college athletics? And then two, like, do you ever have a moment where you're like, you see a whole lot of potential in a kid, and then like, you hear he hits the transfer portal, and you're like, oh man, we're losing another one? Like,
no doubt. I think it's it's a double-edged sword. I think, and athletes are getting paid. That's great, and athletes have freedom to move, which I think is something that a lot of people need, just to find themselves in a situation that's best to get the most out of their college experience, their athletic ability, whatever that might be, and having restrictions on that makes it really hard to do that. But in terms of development, it's a little bit of the Wild West right now for sure. We have I think on women's tennis and baseball, we've got older teams on both with transfer portal heavy class from the summer, and so it's kind of trying to find ways to meet them where they're at. You kind of, depending on the scope of the team and the size of the team, you have to be a little bit more nuanced with how you approach that. When I have a tennis team of 8 girls or guys in, like, I can be a little more individualized with what is a little more you just have more time for individual like modifications and stuff. When you've got a baseball group that is rolling in with 25 to 35 guys, and you are trying to operate in a way that fits the culture of what you're trying to build in there, it's a little bit of a different battle, and you have to be a little bit more. You still have to meet people in the middle and see where they're coming from, but I think it just adds a little more front end work that you have to do. You have to be squared away early, which you should be anyway, but you should have to really be dialed on in terms of like injury history and all that kind of stuff, and see where people are coming from. Have those conversations with them in a less formal setting, so you get like it doesn't have to be a physical every time that you come in. When we have a new athlete, it's like, hey man, what's worked for you in the past? Especially with we've got athletes that come in who have had success elsewhere. How can we continue to build on that? How can we do what you need to do to get ready, and use what you already do within the current framework that we have as a model in training and development within our footprint? And how can we just keep the ball rolling in the right direction? And sometimes those things might conflict a little bit, but I think if we, put in the front end work and relationship building aspect of it, it makes it a lot easier to get buy-in and to get a little bit more, just buy into what we're trying to do across the board.
Do you ever try and pitch a kid who's already in the portal, leaving, to try and stay?
Not really my job.
Yeah,
That's
right.
that would be, I think the hard thing for me in the time going from transfer portal or from non-transfer portal to transfer portal is that you do build like really lasting relationships with student athletes, just with the amount of time you spend with them in the weight room, whether it's baseball or tennis or whatever else. So you get to know these people like outside of just whatever their sport is, outside of the weight room in different ways. So to see them leave sucks sometimes. It's tough to what you said. Like you get these guys and girls that leave, and like, we put in so much good work together. You're really trending the right direction from our side of things, but ultimately it's not my decision to make, and my purpose to try to keep people. It's more on the recruiting side of things, which is always a battle. I think that's, God bless the coaches that have to navigate that right now. Like I just get the back end of it and have to be like, all right, what are we doing today? What are we gonna do? How are we gonna make you better in this 6-month frame that you have? But that in that same vein, it shortens the window that you have when you have a grad transfer come in who is not is kind of a rental, like you kind of a trade deadline rental that you get at the end of the year, and like we're trying to get the most out of you in this 8-month window. How can we do that, and make sure that you perform on the field? So I think that's been an adjustment for sure in terms of not fitting into um, the movement over maxes progression that I learned at TCU from Coach Dakin, and how that's, you kind of got to drop people in, see if they can fly or see if they can swim a little bit, and if they can, move them up rapidly into an area or a development group that fits their the stimulus they need. And if you need to adjust, you need to adjust. But it's a lot less so formulated around how old they are and how what they're at, where they're at in your progression. It's more so just meeting the athletes where they're at and trying to build on them from there, and being a lot more adaptable for in terms of not being married to exercises and all this kind of stuff that we everyone's gonna front squat when you get in, everyone's gonna go out gobble, like not having that rigid mindset, but being a little more adaptable to how we can chase a stimulus, not a movement, and go from there.
Similarly, how would you say that? I mean, like, given what we're talking about, basically everyone has like their guy or their girl that they work with, especially on the strength and conditioning side. How do you manage that when they're outside? For the 6-7 months that they're working with you, and then they go off on their own. Is it more like just a Jesus take the wheel type moment where it's like, okay, like we did good work here, and hopefully it's if you don't know like what they're doing, or if you know like they're going somewhere, you're like, oh my god, they're gonna work with this person again.
Yeah, sure. I think you definitely get that, no doubt. I think you always get a tennis. I think tennis players in general have their own people back home who are very skill mimicry oriented versus like sport specific, or sport mimicry. Yeah, something like that, where it's just like it's not what we were going for this whole past year, but we'll make it work. But I think it comes down to a lot of communication, kind of those relationship building skills that we hopefully have built out throughout the year, and we've been able to show that what we're doing is helping them on court. And it is a bit of a Jesus take the wheel kind of scenario, especially in the summer or over the winter break. I mean, that's one where you're just like, God, I hope you did your work over the off season. Like especially with all my sports, they all ramp up super fast in January and February, and they're off and running. You don't get much of a ramp up when you get back from work. So if you're not using that, 3 to 4 weeks that you have off in the right way, then you're gonna be behind the 8 ball when you get back, and you're probably gonna be at a higher risk for injury, and that's obviously not what we want. But it's communicate. If luckily I've been around long enough and know a lot of people that like these athletes are going to on the baseball side of things. Like we've had a handful of athletes go down to push, and I know Taylor and a lot of those guys down there. So yeah, that's one of those things where you have a little bit of a network connection where you can reach out and get like, how's this guy doing? What's he looking like? What is this person doing? Here's what I need him to be able to do when they get back, or all those kind of conversations. And a lot of front end work that you have to navigate. But ultimately, it's we can there's CARA rules and all that kind of stuff that you have to work around in the collegiate setting in terms of what you're able to make athletes do when they're gone away from your campus over break. So can't break those. So it's a lot of trust. And hopefully they there's a little two-way trust there in terms of how they go about their business away from you.
Kind of on the flip side of that, there's also instances like where you're the guy for athletes. Like we'll use like Will Simpson for example, where it's like, and I'm not saying he would do this, but where it's like it's time for him to leave your care, but I'm not again, him or another athlete would be like, oh, I don't want to go. Like if he's going to affiliate, oh, I don't like their strength conditioning program. Like, how can I just keep on doing your stuff? Is that a moment where you just like tell the athlete, let Jesus take the wheel?
Yeah, I think in that case, and like, I think the minor league strength coaches have a tough job, and because they have the opposite job that we have for us in terms of the off season, where you can hopefully make your most development. That's the time that you usually don't have with your players. You're much not that I know from experience because I haven't gotten the chance to do it in a full-time capacity, but in-season training is in-season training. You try to just keep things in the general right direction. You probably don't have as much of a structured progression to how you're going to build out an off season. So I think navigating that conversation with the athlete and knowing like I'm lucky to I've connected with, I think, for example, Will's strength coach in the past, and his affiliate strength coach, and just checked in just to have that rapport. And you do your best effort to reach out to affiliates or affiliate coaches, whoever they might be tagged. I always try to get that information, and some of the minor leaguers that I get back like, yeah, hey, so and so is going to reach out to you to just check in, and I usually don't end up getting that call, which is always like, all right, I'm ready. Like I'll fill them in, give them what we're doing.
Tell me about the times you've actually gotten that call.
Exactly. Yeah, it's very limited. I would say very limited, but I think they're luckily in pro ball too now you get a lot more of objective testing, so the athletes are much more aware of what they need to be in shape to be able to do on the way back. Like, these were your numbers when you left, they better, like, hopefully they're up when you get back, or at least the same, or at least trending in the right direction. So using those reports that they get shipped home with to kind of build out their program and try to move the needle in the right direction for what they're getting measured by is definitely a big aspect to it. So if we can do that, then we're going to be in a good spot going forward to continue to obviously want to have good relationships with any strength coaches or that our players are working with, and very transparent about that on our end of things. If anyone has questions, they're more, and I always tell them to reach out, connect. We can talk about, see what there's any restrictions, but it doesn't always happen. That's for sure.
I have a funny story kind of similar to this. My last year at Akron, and all my Akron teammates who are watching, you know what I'm talking about right now. We had a player basically have his own private hitting guy back at home, and our hitting coach was like trying to work on something with him, and basically said player didn't like what he was doing, and at one point the hitting coach was like, yeah, we're going to go back to my office, we're going to talk about it. And on the field during practice, this player says, can we loop my hitting coach in on the phone call? And like right then and there, like all of us kind of like, oh no, here we go.
What are we doing?
And it was like immediately our hitting coach was like, I don't give a F about you guy. Like, you're going to do what I say, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And it became like a really like tense moment on the field where all of us kind of like got quiet. We're like, oh shoot, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
And both player and coach were like, super pissed off for like the next 5 minutes. It was like player was like angrily swinging, hitting massive bombs. I mean, these things are
Daddy
going
hacks in
like,
the
yeah,
case to
right.
try to prove a point.
Yeah, hitting coach is fuming. All of us were like kind of distancing ourselves from him. And finally, it was like I remember like watching like hitting coach went over, and he was like, "We're gonna go on the Gator," and they just like hopped in the Gator, drove all the way back to the office, and like all of us were kind of like, "What just happened?" And our volunteer, who like if he's watching, he's gonna laugh. He like comes over by like the turtle, and he was like, "So what just happened?" And then like all of us kind of just laughed, but it was really funny. But yeah, that's kind of like one of those moments where I think like you're talking about, like you kind of want to teeter that line of like
Yeah.
you don't want to bring somebody else down by like directly saying like, "Hey, let's loop my other hitting coach in or my other strength and conditioning coach in." Terry mentioned a minute ago, like, tell us about the time you've actually got that phone call of some other strength coach reaching out, being like, "Hey, I have so and so player down here." What is that phone call like? Is it more cooperative or is it kind of combative?
I try to make it as cooperative. I like to your point. It hasn't happened often. The most it's happened with has been with Taylor Davis down at Push, who when they have guys down in Arizona or guys that have worked remotely with him, like it's always a good con. I know Taylor from we both entered at TCU. We didn't overlap, but we were there around similar times, and I think we actually played against each other in college. He was at Gonzaga, I was at LMU, so I think there was some overlap there. Obviously, didn't know that at the time. I wasn't playing. He was probably pitching. I was on the bench. But it's always good. Like I think what, especially on the private side of things, what a lot of those practitioners are able to do is get a lot more hands on than what we are able to do within the constraints of time and accessibility that we have with our athletes. So if Taylor calls me up and says, "Hey, this guy's got our PT's working with him on this," is his lead leg internal rotation is given him back pain in the past, just something to be aware of as you go to load him and all that stuff. This is what we've had success with. It's all information that I'm digesting, taking down, and to the point of transfer portal type of players coming in, like having that information before that athlete gets on campus, so you don't have to spend that time digging deep to get that information, which hopefully it doesn't take too much information or too much digging to get into. But like when you go in armed a little bit with some of that information before working with them, I think it really helps to just get off on the right foot with that athlete to show them, hey, I'm talking to your guy back home or your gal back home, and we're on the same page. I think that helps build buy-in, especially in the year of like or in the time of transfer portal people who are here for a year, maybe two, who have this relationship with a strength coach back home that I don't have. So if I can show them that I'm trying to connect with them and get on the same page because like we said earlier, like you don't get to a place like UW competitively as an athlete without having success. So you've been successful so far in your career. How can we continue that and make you feel comfortable within our system to continue to push the envelope in the way that you feel like you need to push it? I think you get a lot of credibility with the athlete and how you build that relationship for sure.
You kind of talked about like 2 and 1 year windows for athletes. How long does like actual physical development take for a college athlete? A lot of guys come in probably underdeveloped because they get by on like really just raw athletic skill. How long does really reaching their I don't want to say genetic potential because like that takes a long time, but like ultimately getting close to that ceiling, like how long does that take? Probably not the 1 or 2 year gap, and like how detrimental is that for athletes who just bounce around from one school to the next?
Yeah, 100%. I think 2 points to that. I think the window, the 1 to 2 year window is really hard. I think for especially at UW, we have a shorter window in general because we're on the quarter system, so our fall start is going to be later for the most part for most of our teams. If they're a spring sport, if you're a fall sport, obviously you get a little leg up because you can train the summer a little bit, but you have to work around those type of things. I think it's 1 to 2 years is enough time. I think the most success, like the biggest development, I think the college 4 year model in general probably isn't the best for athletic development. And on the physical side of things, I think we have guys like our pro ball guys who come back and train, and you see where they're at now, and you're like, dang, you were just kind of scratching the surface when you left year 3 or year 4 when you got drafted. Now you still had a lot more in the tank. Like, and we pushed it pretty good in that time period to get you stronger, get you more explosive, get you faster, all that kind of stuff. So I think everyone responds differently, obviously, but I think the 1 to 2 year window, and I think the inconsistency of training model, I think if you're bouncing around, makes it really hard to see consistent progress. I mean, we always say that about, I think, in-season training in general. Like, it's the longest uninterrupted time of physical development you can have, and so if you're not training, you're probably missing the boat on a lot, and you're going to come back in the fall next year in the same place, or at least marginally better than where you were at the end of the spring, or at the beginning of the last fall. So I think to think in a longer scope than a year-to-year basis is really helpful in how you plan out and how you try to develop players. And I've actually had in recent years, I feel like the high school guys that we have coming in, high school girls that we have coming in on other sports are a lot more physically developed than I think than what they used to be when I started here. I think there's a lot more good work being done on the front end in high school strength and conditioning. There's also bad work, but that's hopefully I've seen a lot more athletes come in ready to train and compete at the level that they need to be at, especially maybe not from a skill standpoint, but in the weight room side of it, like in terms of built out foundational movement patterns, motor control that, sometimes you don't have that with incoming athletes. A lot of international students where the vibe around strength and conditioning is different. I think some of them might be behind the 8 ball in terms of their development, but on the baseball side specifically, I think you have a lot more developed physically athletes coming in. That might just be who we're recruiting. You never know with that, but I think in general, it's probably a broad statement, but I think athletes are getting developed better in the high school age range when they're going through high school strength conditioning or whatever they might be doing. So it makes the onboarding process a ton easier. We don't have to spend the time going through, the foundation patterns and all that kind of stuff that is essential but kind of boring. I think in terms of from a development standpoint, whether no matter what model you're kind of running, that foundation program is never usually the most exciting in terms of methodology that you're using, and not that the methodology always has to be exciting, but I think if you're doing exciting things, athletes buy in a little bit more if it's more regimented, which I think a large part of that foundation development is very boring, monotonous, stacking good patterns at submaximal efforts. Like, I think that's what that development period should be. But if they're checking the box on that, then they can do some more exciting stuff, chase some heavier weight, do some more advanced training methods that gets them to put in the effort, going back to the first conversation we were having, put in the effort and buy into what we're doing, then I think that helps move the needle a little bit faster for them.
Is there a moment, or like, do you have a harder time with somebody who, let's say, comes in super physically developed, but on the skill side is lacking, and basically the head coach is kind of like, look, like, I don't care like what his force split numbers say in the weight room. I don't care like that he's the strongest guy out there. Like, he's not performing on the field. How do you combat that? Obviously, like, you're not a skill coach. It's not your job to basically have him be good on the field. But when it comes to then when he comes back in the weight room, like, what do you basically talk to him? Because he's probably feeling a little bit dejected. If he's pretty physically, I don't want to say tapped out, but physically up there, and then the skill set just isn't there. Like, what does his workouts look like, or hers? And then how do you kind of navigate that with head coach and player and you?
Yeah, and we definitely get that. We look like Tarzan, play like Jane kind of situation where they could, like, everyone's seen it. You have an athlete that comes in that blows your mind away on the force plates or in the weight room in terms of the weights that they can move, the loads they can move, and or speed wise, and then they go out on the field and it's just not what they're good at right now. So I think a lot of that comes down to communication with the skill coaches, it providing them the context, because a lot of times that can get conflated. Like, well, this guy sucks. He just needs to get stronger. He just needs to get more explosive, and then he'll be better. And being able to navigate that conversation is hard because it puts a lot of onus on the skill coach to see where they're at, especially. But if you have any kind of normative data or context to show them, like, here's every guy that we've ever jumped on the force plates, they're in the 95th percentile. they're good at this. Like they're already good at this. We can try to spend and allocate more time from a training economy standpoint to their skill development, and that might look different. If anything, I think it should be um, encouraging for a skill coach, because I think if you have someone who's physical already, like I think in general sport coaches wish they had more time, just like we do on the strength and conditioning side of things, wish they had more time to spend with athletes on a one-on-one basis or on a group basis to make those individual adjustments, just because of the hours limitations that you run into in college. So if you can tell them, hey, we probably don't need to spend as much time in the weight room on this. Like you might be a little individualized, but if we can have that conversation with the sport coach and be like, I think they would benefit from, an extra hitting session or an extra on-court session, whatever that might be, instead of maybe a fourth day in the weight room. Because to your point, what needle are we moving at that point? Are we just getting them stronger to get stronger at the cost of them still being a bad baseball player or a bad tennis player, whatever sport it is? They still can't hit a slider. So I don't think, no matter what kind of weight you're moving in the weight room, how high you jump, you still got to be able to do that. You got to be able to attack the game and get better at the skill side of things. So I think that's a good conversation to have. It doesn't always go the way you hope it does, but it's there's if you can provide context to where they're at in terms of the rest of the group and the normative data that you might have, all that kind of stuff, I think that helps. And I think most times athletes themselves, like, there's some athletes are meatheads, some aren't. Some are going to want to keep lifting, but you have to be able to educate them onto why. Not that it won't be useful, but like their time may be spent better attacking certain other aspects of their development that aren't weight room oriented. But
Is there anything else that you guys do like biomechanically? I know you mentioned like you're the head of sports science right now. Do you guys have a biomechanics lab? Do you guys do any type of like biomechanic analysis at all? Is it just force plates? Like, what do you guys do with that?
we have in the past. We're actually, one of the cool things that I've been able to work on this past year is a partnership with some of our upper campus faculty in the Department of Rehab Medicine. Dr. Christina Gresta, who's been an awesome resource for us on the athletic side of things, but she and I did some work when I first got back up here. I didn't do too much of the work. She did the work. She runs the human performance lab on campus, or the research performance lab on campus. And so she's always super eager to get into athletics and help out in any way she can. So we mocapped guys in the past on the mound. We don't really too much right now, or, we're kind of trying to build out what that might look like in the future so we can have a more streamlined development process where we can check these boxes and address more than just the force plate. We can address the biomechanics aspect. We can address workload and on-field stuff across sports. So I think that's the goal, to do that. But when working with her this past year, we're trying to build out more integrated sports science lab type. We're building out a little. We've partnered with Adidas on a cool research project that they're working on in terms of some of their footwear and all that kind of stuff that an Adidas might want out of collecting data and on some triaxial force plates and different tests that we're not really able to do within our context. So adding that into letting her kind of run that has been super useful in getting reports that are hopefully eventually more actionable on our things. Is where we hope to take this thing and where we hope to build it out and have that kind of integrated sports science that spans across different sports. On the biomechanics side with baseball or softball, like, I think it'd be super useful to continue to build out, and so we can be more specific with our skill development on that side of things, so we know what we're chasing. It's not just all film and eye test. We can look at a little more. We can look a little deeper than that and do what the drive lines are doing and all that kind of stuff. At a place like UW, we should have the ability to do that. We just got to build out the systems and get the buy-in across the board and fund it. That's the hard part, is funding it. So that's a big part of it. So hopefully in time we can get to that point, but we're inconsistent with it right now.
You mentioned funding, and this is just like me talking out loud, but college athletics, we basically talked about this last episode too. Like, schools are running massive deficits right now. I mean, even like big schools, Florida State's like at a $400 million deficit. What is the fix for lack of a better phrase. Obviously, there's a lot of different answers. That's like a very ambiguous question, but what is the solution to that? Obviously, UW's in a cross-country conference. The travel expenses are getting up there. What is the solution when private equity is getting involved, big corporate companies are getting involved? There's a lot more money involved in the game, even with like bigger deficits. What's the solution there?
That is a question for someone that makes probably a lot more money than I do. It's a really unique challenge, though. I think being able to, I this is again based on nothing, kind of like you were talking out loud. I think college sports is definitely changing at a rapid pace, and like seeing how funds are allocated is going to be interesting going forward in terms of how we support sports and the amateur aspect of college athletics, which I think makes it really great and exciting to be a part of. I think, everyone talks about the difference between pro sports and college sports, and March Madness coming around the corner. Like, everyone loves watching college basketball. It's a unique experience that's different from the NBA. Same thing with college football and college baseball. I think it's so much different from the pro side of things that I think there's definitely going to be probably some sweeping changes at some point. I don't know what they are, but it's I can imagine in 10 years it'll look very different, just because 5 years ago it looked really different, and 5 years before that it was different. So I can't imagine that the progress or the change, depending on how you want to look at it, is going to slow much with the money involved in it these days. So
For sure. So where is UW going in 10 years, and where are you going in 10 years?
It's $1 million question. Couldn't tell you. In terms of UW, I think the goal at UW is obviously to compete for national championships, regardless of the sport. We had women's soccer this fall, or women's soccer made a great run in the fall, and then men's soccer won the Natty. So like that's awesome. Rowing competes for national championships every year on the men's and the women's side. Softball, history of however many 25 plus regionals in a row, still trying to continue to build on that, legacy of success with Coach Tar and all that kind of stuff. So I think that's the goal. And on the football side of things too, obviously the runs that the football team has had recently are more evidence of that. So I think that's the goal until the rules of the game change and it looks different. But I think there's a lot of people really heavily invested, obviously, in making sure that we're in a position where we can compete for national championships across our sports. As for me, who knows? It's just day by day, and I think I just want to continue. I think the big thing for me and why I got into strength conditioning is to help and to educate student athletes thrive at the next level. And I think when I was at TCU, Coach Sommer, who was the head football strength coach there at the time, always said we're coaching for 40, not 4. So building people, student athletes who are successful far beyond, their time in college. It's such a small window of time that can really feel like the end all be all at the time. But as a guy who's now old and eight years removed from college, and my time at LMU, it was a really cool window, and I want other athletes to be able to appreciate that aspect of it and to take lessons and the lessons they learn from struggling and have to going through hardship to work towards a common goal, all that kind of cliche stuff that you hear about. Like, I think a lot of it's cliche for a reason. And I think that's the goal. So I want to be in a position 10 years from now where I'm hopefully impacting student athletes in a positive way, and continuing to help them get to the next level, whatever that might be for them, and win at whatever they're trying to win at.
That's probably another thing that makes college athletics, in my opinion, better than professional, or like kind of what you talked about, like different than professionals, like the relationships built. Obviously, when you get to professional, it's very much transactional of like, hey, we're paying you a ton of money. Yeah. Can you win or not? And like college athletics is different in the sense of it's more, well, in my mind, it should be more about relationship building. Yep. Obviously, you have to win too. I get that. But in terms of like what you do and your job, yeah, I think a lot of it is tied into relationship building, especially on the weight room side of things, because that induces buy-in.
For sure.
Kind of wrapping up here, I asked just about everybody this question. Do you have a top 3 athletes of all time list? And what I mean by this is basically like best physically or best talent wise, not necessarily your favorite.
Yeah, I think the one that jumped out to me originally was I'm from Northern California originally, A's fan, even though they're not there anymore. But Ricky Henderson, obviously speed, power, the gift of gab as well. Like that guy had it all. I'm actually reading a biography on him right now, so that's probably why it jumped out to me. And then I'm a Michael Jordan fan, so MJ, in terms of the skill side of things, and I mean in the '90s, you know. It's the guy.
Yeah, it's MJ. Yep.
Yeah,
thank you.
I'm not a I don't know. You could honestly just as a 2B, I guess, but you can throw LeBron up there too because his longevity's nuts.
Right.
Obviously, like
It's impressive.
I mean, I don't think you can really go wrong there in terms of those two. But
It's I think basically every couple of months that LeBron and I are the same age, and like I get hurt. Like, I mean, I feel like I'm doing fine, but I'll get hurt like playing with my daughter, and like LeBron and the same night like LeBron goes like 25, 8, and 7. I'm like, okay, what is going on here?
The guy's got it all at this point. I just Terry just got my back right, and I've been golfing more, and this LeBron's going golfing now in season, still playing, still dunking, and all this kind of stuff. It's nuts. So I mean, I'll say Ricky, and then MJ, LeBron 2A, and if I can throw one more person up there, I didn't get this far on my list. I'm trying to change the sport, think of a different sport. I mean, Bo Jackson. I'm not going to change the sport.
Yep.
Bo Jackson.
Bo Jackson.
It's Bo Jackson.
Yep.
Yeah.
Almost everybody said that.
Football and baseball, like it's Bo Jackson.
Yeah.
For sure.
Interestingly enough, everybody says Bo, but nobody says Deion.
That's a good one.
Which, I mean, Bo is a better athlete, but like Deion still did it.
I think just Bo was better.
He was a freak. Yeah,
I
he was a freak.
I feel like his upside in both was higher.
Yeah,
maybe,
for sure.
Depending on who
For sure.
All-star in both, right?
I think so.
Yeah, I think he was all-star.
Was he an all-star in baseball?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
He had one of the most obscene throws you'll ever have.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right.
Made it look real casual too.
Looked like 110 on video too.
Yeah.
Okay, last question. Do you have any crazy stories involving your job or athletes or whatever that is like, wow, you really had to be there to believe it?
Yeah, probably. Let me think. I'll never forget. I think it was either 2022 or 2021. With baseball, we I think won 15 or 16 straight at the end of the year, 15 or 16 or 6. We went on this crazy heater to end the year on the back half, and we were about 500 going through the year. We're in a great spot going into we were just trying to make the Pac-12 at the time, RIP Pac-12 tournament.
For sure.
And
bring it back.
Yeah, exactly. We went on a heater where we I think we took, and I could be conflating years, but I think we took 2 or 3 from Stanford, who was 4 in the country at the time. I think we swept UCLA at home for the first time in Coach Meggs' career, and then I think we swept USC on the road to punch our ticket to the conference tournament. And it was ridiculous. Like, it was just when you get a team that's hot like that, it's I think, and they went to Omaha before I got here, so in 2018 when they kind of went on their run and made it to the College World Series, like, it had similar from the folks that were there at the time. They had the same vibes. Obviously, the result was a little different, but I think when you're on a heater, like, you just got to be a part of it for sure. Like, there's everything just kind of works. You have your superstitions or your routines that are you're doing every day. Sports staff is doing our shot of Monster before every game, doing getting everything right, and it's like, can't mess this up. Like, it can't be on us to blow this streak. So we're gonna stay in routine. We're gonna eat our Sour Patch gummies at this inning and this and I think what's cool about that is that you see it when you have a streak like that, and I think you see athletes rise to the occasion too, and see them compete at a level that they may not have thought they were capable of, and see things start to bounce their way because in my head it's because of all the work they've already done and all the stuff that they've put in on the front end to get to a position where they're confident and that they are finally seeing the results of, that things are starting to bounce their way a little bit. And whenever it's like a no-hitter where you have the one diving play, or a perfect game where you have that diving play, when you're winning games like that, and everything just seems to bounce your way, everyone's making the plays, or even if you're making the wrong throws, or messing things up, someone's picking you up on the back end, and everyone is kind of pulling on the same end of the rope, which is I think the most fun environment to be in when things are really rolling. Obviously, winning solves a lot of problems. So
It does. It really does. Awesome. Well, thank you very much for coming on.
absolutely.
We appreciate you taking the time. Hopefully, Terry got you right. For the viewers, thank you for tuning in to another episode. We will see you next Friday.